especially at that time. I mean, he was one of the top 5, if not even 3, biggest stars in the world.
In Quentin Tarantino's world, loyalty is everything, and betrayal isn't a quiet fade out. It's a cinematic explosion. For 3 decades, he's been Hollywood's most obsessive architect, building worlds where every line, every shot, every drop of blood is under his absolute control. He can take an actor and carve them into a legend, or cut them out so completely, it's like they never existed. Behind the iconic dialogue and blood-soaked brilliance lies a ruthless truth. Once you're out of his circle, you're not just gone, you're erased from the reel. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 6 actors who crossed that invisible line and never found their way back. The veteran whose temper lost him everything, Lawrence Tierney. When Quentin Tarantino cast Lawrence Tierney as Joe Cabot in Reservoir Dogs, it was more than a role, it was a tribute. Tierney was a legend from Hollywood's gritty noir era, the kind of actor whose stone-faced presence could fill a room before he even spoke. Tarantino wrote the part with him in mind, imagining that icy menace anchoring his first feature film. But on set, the dream turned volatile. Tierney wasn't just difficult, he was unpredictable. Crew members whispered about him forgetting lines, snapping at assistants, and getting into heated arguments over the smallest details. Tarantino's sets run on precision, like a Swiss watch ticking in perfect rhythm. Tierney was more like a live grenade, rolling across the floor at random. The breaking point came during a blocking rehearsal. Tarantino gave direction, Tierney pushed back, voices rose, and then Tierney stormed off the set entirely. Most directors might have cooled down, tried again later. Tarantino followed him out and fired him on the spot. At just 29 years old, directing his debut feature, Quentin made it clear there would be no compromises. After Reservoir Dogs, Tierney's name never crossed Tarantino's lips in interviews. No cameos, no callbacks, not even a passing story about their time on set. It was as if the man who played Joe Cabot had been cut out of Tarantino's personal film reel, spliced away, and left on the cutting room floor. And in Quentin's universe, that kind of silence is the ultimate kill shot. But as it turns out, Tierney was just the first casualty in a long list of actors who didn't survive Tarantino's creative crosshairs. The blockbuster star who didn't fit the rhythm, Bruce Willis. In 1994, Pulp Fiction wasn't just a comeback story for John Travolta, it was a reinvention for Bruce Willis. Cast as Butch, the brooding boxer with a deadly grudge, Willis brought a smoldering presence that balanced the film's manic energy. On screen, he nailed it. Off screen, though, the vibe wasn't the same. Tarantino's sets run on a very specific tempo. Dialogue is like music, blocking like choreography. Every beat matters. Bruce, a megastar fresh off Die Hard fame, was used to shaping a movie around him. Tarantino, meanwhile, was a director who believed the movie shapes you. The chemistry never quite clicked. Insiders say Willis was professional, but he wasn't in tune with Tarantino's obsessive rhythm. There was no big blow-up, no public feud, just a quiet recognition that they spoke different creative languages. When the cameras stopped rolling, Willis drifted out of Tarantino's orbit. And in Quentin's world, absence is as telling as outrage. As other Pulp Fiction alumni found their way into his later films, Samuel L. Jackson, Uma Thurman, Tim Roth, Bruce Willis never returned. No cameos, no nods, not even a sly reference in dialogue. The door didn't slam, it just closed and stayed that way. But for Tarantino, sometimes the end isn't polite, it's personal. And our next name proves it. The charming star who was too polished, George Clooney. When George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino shared the screen in From Dusk Till Dawn, it was a meeting of two Hollywood forces from completely different planets. Clooney was America's smooth-talking heartthrob, riding high from R and on the brink of movie superstardom. Tarantino was the wild-eyed indie darling, rewriting the rules of cinema with raw edges and chaotic brilliance. On paper, it worked. Clooney's cool, measured delivery against Tarantino's manic energy as his co-star. But behind the scenes, Quentin quickly realized something. Clooney's style was too clean. Tarantino thrived on grit, imperfection, and unpredictability. Clooney, by contrast, had the kind of polished charm that felt like it belonged to a different movie altogether. It wasn't that Clooney was difficult, far from it. By all accounts, he was professional, gracious, even fun. But Tarantino's films live in the cracks, in the messy humanity that bleeds through the frame. Clooney's composure, his deliberate movie star aura, didn't fit that raw, jagged world. After From Dusk Till Dawn, the two men went their separate ways. Clooney's career soared into Oceans and Oscar territory, while Tarantino doubled down on the gritty, off-kilter characters that made him famous. There was no fallout, no public shade, just a mutual understanding that they were playing different games. And yet, in the unspoken language of Tarantino's casting, never calling someone back is its own kind of verdict. Clooney was simply not a Tarantino guy. But the next name on the list wasn't just not a fit. He openly challenged Tarantino, and the fallout was explosive. When two film titans collide, Spike Lee. Quentin Tarantino and Spike Lee are both powerhouse storytellers, fiercely protective of their creative visions, and fiercely outspoken when they feel something's wrong. So when their paths crossed, sparks didn't just fly, they ignited a cultural firestorm. The clash began in the late 90s, when Lee publicly criticized Tarantino's scripts for what he saw as an excessive and casual use of racial slurs, particularly the N-word. Spike Lee, whose films like Do the Right Thing and Malcolm X confront racism head-on, argued that Tarantino was exploiting language without fully understanding the lived experience behind it. Tarantino didn't back down. In interviews, he defended his word choice as authentic to the worlds and characters he wrote, insisting that art shouldn't be sanitized. For him, the language wasn't gratuitous, it was realism. But for Spike Lee, it was a line you didn't cross without consequence. The feud played out in headlines and talk shows, with each director holding their ground. There was no middle ground to find. This was a philosophical war over storytelling itself. And unlike actors who simply drift out of Tarantino's call sheet, Lee's name became shorthand for the rare figure who could go toe-to-toe with Quentin and not blink. To this day, the two have never collaborated. In fact, it's hard to imagine a world where they ever would. Their artistic visions, while equally passionate, run in opposite directions, and neither man is known for compromise. But if Spike Lee was a creative rival, the next actor was something worse in Tarantino's book, a betrayal from within. The loyal regular who fell silent, Steve Buscemi. In the early days of Quentin Tarantino's career, Steve Buscemi was more than just a great actor. He was part of the inner circle. Reservoir Dogs made him a cult icon as Mr. Pink, the sharp-tongued, tip-avoiding thief who stole every scene without firing a shot. For fans, Buscemi was the quintessential Tarantino character, quirky, unpredictable, and unforgettable. After Reservoir Dogs, everyone assumed Buscemi would be a recurring face in Tarantino's cinematic universe, much like Samuel L. Jackson or Tim Roth. But then nothing. No cameo in Pulp Fiction, no role in Kill Bill, no surprise appearance in Inglourious Bastard. The silence was deafening. Insiders have whispered about what happened, but the truth has never been officially confirmed. Some say it was scheduling conflicts. Buscemi was working non-stop through the 90s and 2000s. Others believe it was more personal, a quiet drifting apart after the intense, scrappy energy of their first collaboration. Tarantino, for all his loyalty to actors, is also someone who moves fast. If you're not there when he calls, the call might not come again. Buscemi never badmouthed Tarantino, and Quentin never spoke ill of him. It was just absence. For fans, that absence became its own mystery. Why would one of Tarantino's most perfect casting choices vanish from his worlds entirely? In a career built on explosive confrontations and dramatic fallouts, the Buscemi story is perhaps the strangest of all. Not an ending with fireworks, but with silence. And then there's the final name. A Hollywood legend whose ego was big enough to clash with Tarantino's, and whose exit was as dramatic as you'd expect. The legend who wanted to direct the director, Warren Beatty. Warren Beatty isn't just an actor, he's Hollywood royalty. By the time Quentin Tarantino came calling in the late 90s, Beatty had decades of hits behind him, from Bonnie and Clyde to Reds. He wasn't just a performer, he was a filmmaker in his own right, with an Oscar for directing and a reputation for total creative control. Tarantino, meanwhile, was still riding the wave of Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown, at the peak of his cult celebrity swagger. When the two began talks for Kill Bill, it seemed like a dream pairing. Beatty as Bill himself, the enigmatic leader of the deadly Viper assassination squad. But the dream soured quickly. Beatty's instinct was to shape the role, the dialogue, even the film's tone, offering suggestions, making script changes, and essentially trying to co-direct from the actor's chair. For most filmmakers, having Warren Beatty's input would be an honor. For Tarantino, whose films are built on his singular voice, it was unacceptable. Quentin isn't a collaborator in the traditional sense. He's an auteur. Every frame, every word, every beat of music is his. The moment it became clear that Beatty wanted more than just to play Bill, that he wanted to guide Bill, the partnership collapsed. The role ultimately went to David Carradine, whose zen-like willingness to inhabit Tarantino's vision made him the perfect choice. Carradine didn't try to direct the director. He trusted the ride. As for Beatty, he never worked with Tarantino, and likely never will. In the end, the two men were simply too alike in one crucial way. Neither was willing to let someone else take the wheel. Loyalty, obsession, and the cost of crossing Quentin Tarantino. In Quentin Tarantino's universe, talent alone isn't enough. It's not enough to be charming, iconic, or even legendary. To survive in his cinematic world, an actor must move in lockstep with his vision, trust his rhythm, and surrender to his obsessive creativity. Step out of line, and the consequences aren't just missed roles, they're permanent absence. From Lawrence Tierney's explosive temper to Bruce Willis's mismatched tempo, George Clooney's polished charisma, Spike Lee's outspoken criticism, Steve Buscemi's quiet drifting, and Warren Beatty's attempts to direct the director, each story is a lesson in loyalty, ego, and the high stakes of collaboration. Tarantino doesn't forgive mistakes casually. He doesn't recycle talent that disrupts his universe. He doesn't apologize for his standards. For those inside his circle, it's exhilarating, being part of a living, breathing myth. For those outside, it's a lesson in how creativity and control can collide with careers and reputations. In Tarantino's world, the line between genius and wrath is razor thin, and crossing it means vanishing from the story entirely. And that's the truth behind the names you might have expected to see again, but never did. Who do you think deserved a second chance? Or were these erasures justified? Let us know in the comments. Because in the world of Tarantino, every story has more than one layer.